Hello ladies and gentlemen, welcome to code review of movie ratings for Netflix Flutter application. Now, don't panic, even though the name of this application contains Flutter, it is native Android application and is not related to Flutter framework in any way. So, according to the description on Google Play, this application basically shows ratings for shows and movies when you browse Netflix and several other streaming services. It looks like its main feature is basically to show this overlay over some host application, and in this overlay it shows the rating of the movie. Well, I think it's really cool application because if Netflix and other streaming services don't show any kind of ratings for their content, then it might be very helpful to get it from this external application. Really nice. This app has quite a nice rating and it was installed around 10,000 times. Cool. Another cool thing about this app is that its author, Jay Rambia. Sorry Jay, I probably mispronounced your name. So Jay hosts its source code on GitHub and you and me can easily see and review it. That's really cool. So without further ado, let's get into the source code. The very first thing I always do is checking out the size of the application. So it has this app folder, Gradle, lint rules and screenshots folder. Out of all of these, I think app is the only module in this application. So I can use clock tool and basically point it to app, source and probably main. No, let's do app source. So it has about 16,000 lines of code. And just to make sure, I would also want to point it to main specifically. So this folder contains 15,000. So most of the code of this application is contained within this app source main, which is the one single module. Now I want to take a look at build.gradle of the entire application. Nothing really special here, so we can get to build.gradle of the app module. So here the app version constants and nothing really special here. Version code and version name generated using these functions. So they basically take those constants and construct version code and version name strings. It's nice. Okay, so we have 2 flavors and 2 build types, so in total this app has 4 variants, and one of the flavors has this FOSS suffix, so probably it is the one that is hosted on F-Droid, and this one probably goes to Play Store, and also the name of this flavor implies that it goes to Play Store. Okay, build types, debug, release, and test options unit test return default values equals true. And this might be problematic. So let's understand why. As you might know, if you unit test your code and your code uses Android classes, then you will get an exception when you try to run your tests. And the exception will tell you that basically Android classes and their methods are stopped and you can't unit test them. I wouldn't like to get into the reasons for these exceptions that you might get, and I will just link to another video which I extracted from my course about unit testing in Android, and in that video I go into the depths and explain why you get this exception and in which cases you get this exception and how can you work around that. So if you try to unit test and use Android classes, you will get an exception. And you don't want that, obviously, so you need to work around this thing. The first approach is to basically wrap Android classes in your own classes and use them. The second approach is to mock Android classes. And the third approach is to use this flag, return default values equals true. And this flag, from what I saw, developers usually set it to true because they have some static calls in their code. So that might be like login calls, or maybe something as trivial as text utils is empty, or any other static call into Android framework. And once you've got this static call in your class, you can't really mock it and you can't do anything about it. So the only thing really you can do, well, there are 2 things you can do. One, to use a tool called PowerMock, which is really a hack that manipulates bytecode and can substitute even static dependencies. And I would strongly recommend to stay away of this approach. And the second approach is to set this flag to true. And if you set this flag to true, then Android APIs, instead of throwing exceptions, will start returning default values. And this can make your life a bit easier because now you can, for example, use log calls in your classes and your classes will still be unit testable. However, there is a huge risk when you do that, because when you are unit testing, you need to ensure that your code works with all possible outputs from the APIs you are integrating with. And this flag basically makes the Android APIs always return the same value, default. So if some API returns, for example, integer value, then using this flag, you will make it return 0 always. So you will write your unit test, and unit test will always get 0 out of Android API, and it will pass. The risk and the danger here is that at runtime, you can really get all kinds of values from that API. And since you haven't tested your code against different values returned by that API, then basically it can fail at runtime. So you get a situation where unit tests pass for specific class, but this class can still fail functionally at runtime. And that's the worst case of unit testing, when you have unit tests that give you the false sense of safety. Now you can still use this flag and not do that mistake, and you can get away with it. But in a few months or a year, or maybe another developer can actually make this mistake. So once you use this flag, you open your code base for this kind of error forever. So what I do recommend to do? Well, first of all, as I said, I have a video where I show why this is problematic and what kind of problem this comes to solve. And really what you should do is to not use static calls at all, and especially not use static calls into Android framework in your classes. So just wrap these calls with your own classes, make them non-static, and then mock them in your unit tests. That will do. So I'm not saying that this application has this problem, but in general this flag is very risky to use, especially if you do massive unit testing and you have a big team and everyone writing unit tests. Then, well, the probability of having unit tests that give you false sense of safety is very high. In general, I would say you should not unit test integrations with any Android classes. Okay, so the dependencies of this app are relatively standard, nothing interesting here, a lot of RxJava stuff, retrofit, and then we have room, right, glide for showing images, JUnit Mockito, and Nick Harman's library Mockito Kotlin. I heard a lot of good things about it, so thumbs up, Nick. I probably mispronounced your name too, sorry for that either. Okay, and Steto, and something about Debug Db. So again, we have this for SQLADB debug, so it's very good practice to put these kinds of commands over dependencies to let future readers like myself know what this thing does. So now I know for SQLADB debug, very clear. And Steto, well, in this case, this comment is not very good because it should have said what this thing does and not what it is, because I can see that it is Steto right here. But actually Steto is Facebook's debug bridge, and it allows you to see, for example, your network traffic and see the contents of your shared preferences in Chrome while you are debugging your Android application. I don't use it much, but sometimes it comes very handy. Okay, leak canary for detecting memory leaks, and some billing stuff, analytics. Moshi is basically serialization library for JSON probably. Alright, so nothing really special in this build Gradle file except for this flag, which I would recommend to remove, and then if your unit tests fail, you know what, let's test it. I remove this flag, and then I will go to the project and find the tests. Let's run these ones. So the tests are running now. Let's see. And voila, all the tests passed. Well, it means that there is really no reason to keep this flag in your application, and you can safely remove it right now, and thus preventing future mistakes. So really just go ahead and so I recommend just going ahead and removing this flag from your project. Okay, the next file I'd like to see is manifest, right? So Android manifest, and we have 3 of them, so probably they override some values for debug and for Play Store. But what I'm really interested in is the main one. And now I can see that this app uses internet and system alert window permissions. Well, this one isn't surprising at all because, as we discussed at the beginning of this code review, this app basically shows overlay over other applications. To show any kind of overlay, you actually need this system alert window permission. Okay, something interesting here, and not very much. One activity, so it's main activity, and then settings activity, and then import activity. But really, the main functionality of this app is not in activities. So it's kind of special because, well, let me show you. Because this app shows overlay ratings when you browse in other applications, then basically its main function is done in background, and activities are not involved in its main function. Therefore, activities aren't the most interesting part here, and I want to get to the service. So we have one service called Netflix Reader Service. It is accessibility service, and if I need to put my money on something, I would say that this service uses accessibility events and accessibility features to basically read the contents of the screen and understand which movie the user is looking at. Because I wouldn't expect, for example, Netflix application to broadcast the names of the series that the user is looking at. It will be very nice of them to help, but I don't think it happens. So J basically uses accessibility stuff to read this content off screen. And we have this file provider. I'm not sure I can guess what it's used for, so we'll need to look at that. And then we have additional service which isn't exported, and it's called Bubble service. Isn't exported means that external entities can't invoke it, can't access and send intents to this service. And since it's called Bubble service, I would guess that this service is the one that actually shows this rating bubble over other applications. Anything else here? No. So out of all of this stuff, I probably want to start with Bubble service because it's probably the most interesting one. So we have this rating displayer, and we have composite disposable. And okay, we have setting preferences. And by the way, I already see that this application probably doesn't use dependency injection. Preferences, settings, preferences, these kinds of calls immediately tell me that probably dependency injection isn't used here. And a displayer, of course, new displayer. One of the downsides of not using dependency injection is this kind of stuff. So J basically initializes these settings preferences objects. It's probably a wrapper around shared preferences, if I would need to guess. Yep, shared preferences and a bunch of keys. So J initializes these setting preferences objects just in order to get this ratings displayer, because this preferences variable never used outside of this method. This is called law of Demeter violation. This service shouldn't know anything about settings preferences. It uses ratings displayer, and that's the only dependency that it should have. But now, instead of just using ratings displayer, it also depends on settings preferences. Well, not a big issue in this case, but as your application grows and as this kind of initializations spread across your code base, it might become a very big issue. So for example, if this rating displayer is used in 10 places and now you want to add some parameter to its constructor, then basically you will need to change it in 10 places. So I would recommend to use dependency injection in all applications. And some developers freak out. They say that, dependency injection is only for the big projects and I have small projects, so it doesn't work for me or it's not worthwhile. And I say to all of that is that it's just unsubstantiated fear. Dependency injection works in all applications of all sizes, and any project can benefit from dependency injection, and it doesn't take much time once you know it. You invest time into learning dependency injection. It might take time because it's a very non-trivial topic, and if you hear developers saying that dependency injection is just passing arguments into constructors, then you can safely assume that these developers don't understand dependency injection, and it's better for you not to learn from them. Dependency injection is kind of a complex topic, and it gets even more complicated once you add dependency injection frameworks into the picture. But it's one-time investment, and once you know how to do it, and once you know how to use some dependency injection frameworks, then setting it up in a new project takes like minutes. So I have a video, and in this video, with all the explanations around what I do, it takes me about 30 minutes to set up Dagger in a new project. 30 minutes, that's what it takes. And once you invested this initial ramp up and then you invested like 30 minutes into setting it up on your new project, then you basically get a return on that investment for however long your application lives. And it makes your code much more cleaner and makes reuse much easier, because like these kind of instantiations, dependency injection basically removes all this coupling instantly. Okay, enough about dependency injection. Simply just use it and don't believe developers who say that it's too complex or you don't need it because your project is small. And the next interesting method in this service is onStart command. This method is the main entry point into services, and it receives some intent from the outside and some flags in start ID. And then the service is basically launched and you can do some work. So the first thing J does here is initializing this rating object, rating data structure. It's not an object, it's a data structure with what looks like some fake data. Interesting. Why does he need fake data here? Okay, we'll get back to it later. And then it uses this displayer to show the rating. This thing basically calculates the position and sets a bubble color and bubble size, and then can draw over other windows. And if it can draw, then it basically returns, because it doesn't have this capability. And if it does have this capability, then it basically creates a new floating rating and some analytics and adds it to the window. So basically this displayer takes care of showing this rating bubble over other applications. What's interesting here, however, is this nullability annotation. And if I would need to guess, then I'd say that this displayer can be null because here it's not defined as late init but defined as var. And since it's initialized later here in onCreate, then basically Kotlin forces J to like specify these nullability annotations anywhere. These are not annotations. I don't remember how they are called in Kotlin. But basically in Java that would work. You will just basically not put anything on this displayer and you could use it anywhere as you wish. But here you need it to have either late init or to have these ugly question marks. And in this case, if I'm not mistaken, again, I'm not a big Kotlin expert, as you might know. In this case, I would say using late init stuff is basically better than using these question marks everywhere. Okay, and then basically disposables. We add to disposable some event bus subscribe event, basically displayer update color is showing view. So if we get bubble color event on event bus, then we basically do update color, and if not showing the view, we show the rating window again. Okay, and another thing we add to disposable is that if we get a bubble detail event, then we update the size of the bubble. And this service is sticky. Sticky means that if it's killed, then operating system should relaunch it. And when this service is destroyed, all the disposables are disposed, and then displayer removes its view from the screen. Okay, one thing that I don't understand is like, okay, here we use this mock data, fake data on movie rating, and then we can basically override the color and the size, but we can't override the content. So how exactly this application shows content, other content? Interesting. So let's get back here. And this service, remember, this accessibility service is the one that probably reads the data from the applications. So what I would like to see here is how exactly it works. Okay, so these are probably the applications that this application support, and preferences displayer. So Netflix Reader service also constructs this displayer object, and the fact that this service instantiates the displayer means probably that it displays this bubble by itself. And then the question becomes, why does the application need this bubble service if Netflix Reader service? And by the way, let's talk about the naming for a second. It's called Netflix Reader service, but actually it reads much more applications than that, many more applications than that. I understand that probably this application actually worked with just Netflix initially, but now it works with more clients, so it's probably worthwhile to rename this Netflix Reader service to something else, which is probably just Reader service. And since it now displays its own ratings, then it's not Reader anymore. So the name of this service could benefit from refactoring into something that actually reflects the capability of this service itself. So the question remains, why does J need this bubble service, which is very simple, just shows this stuff. And to understand that, and this bubble service, I remind you, it's not exported, right? So exported false. So it means that only internal application code can call it. So what I'd like to do is basically see where it's used. The only place it is used in this rating bubble section fragment, and it's used in onDestroy view and in onView created. So in onDestroy view, this service is just shut down, and in onView created, it is started. So the question now is, what's this rating bubble section fragment? Let's see, get screen title. So screens have title, and this function says that the title of this screen is rating bubble customization, which probably means that this application allows you to customize the appearance of this bubble that shows the rating, and this fragment is responsible for it. And therefore, this bubble service is only used to show the bubble when you customize it. So you can see how your actions affect its appearance. And this explains why this update color and update size are here. So I would guess that you can either change the color of the bubble or change the size of the bubble. You probably can't change the position because I don't see the position or something else being modified. The mystery is resolved. This fake data is here because this service isn't really used to show some actual data. All it's used for is to show this bubble when you customize it. It will be very interesting to understand why J couldn't use like the same service. But this review already got pretty long, and I will probably dig into this question, why this application needs two services, in the next part of this review. So, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you enjoyed this code review. If you did, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to this channel, because there will be part 2 soon. And if you didn't like, then please leave a comment, let me know what was the problem that you didn't like, and I will try to improve for the next code reviews. In general, I really like this application. It's very nice and it's actually useful, I think. I'm not Netflix customer myself, but if I would be, I would definitely use this application because it's just basics to see the ratings of the movies or the series when you browse Netflix. So all of you out there, Netflix users, just go and grab this application right away and use it and give it 5 stars review as well. So goodbye everyone, and I'll see you in the next part of this code review.